thing that I'm hearing at the moment from people on the Brexit side of the current political climate is people voted for Brexit, and if we don't go ahead with Brexit as soon as possible, then democracy has been irreparably damaged. And firstly, like, we're kind of stuck with democracy. I mean, I don't know what alternative people think there is, but I don't think there's any realistic likelihood that we're going to return to a system of serfs and peasants and barons and hereditary inherited status in life. And if we were to go back to that system, let's be honest, the people who'd be happiest about it would be Brexit voters. But on the other hand, I agree. Democracy is really not doing very well in this country. It is really a mess. Let's go back to the beginning. Democracy in this country, the essence of it started out with the Chartists, right? An amazing campaigning group of working class individuals. And they had 6 demands that they asked for, and 5 of them we, broadly speaking, now have in the UK. And then, of course, the 7th one, which came later, was for women to get the vote as well. But if we look at their original 6 demands, there's one that we didn't get. And that's that the Chartists wanted annual elections. And that might sound outrageous, but I think it's a brilliant idea. Because at the moment, what feels like it happens is that every 5 years is a general election. And so people spend a fortune on marketing and coming up with all these big promises. And this, it's kind of a big old showbiz event, an election. And then somebody gets elected. And then they're like, hey, do what we like for 5 years. Annual elections would force parties to be super accountable because they've been elected. Are they getting on with the things they promised? Are they telling the truth about the things they promised? Are the things they promised starting to show signs of being effective? Are these things coming into action? And it would actually encourage people to be much more engaged with what's going on because they'd see stuff happening. They'd be back at the polls having another chance to have their say on it. I think it would do a lot to improve the way that our democracy works. But even without that, looking at what's happening in terms of our democracy, there's a lot of mess going on. First of all, democracy is meaningless unless people actually are voting based on real information. So obviously, yeah, I'm talking about the buses that went around the country with the lies on, and I'm sure there's Brexiteers out there going, oh, well, the Remain side lied too, but that's a pretty meaningless argument, isn't it? That's like, yes, officer, he punched me in the face as well. You're wrong, like, you're in the wrong. It doesn't matter if everybody else is in the wrong as well. You should be addressing the fact that you're in the wrong. But I'm also talking about the newspapers, right? The newspapers are full of often absolutely provable lies, often complete distortions of what is going on in politics, and failing that, at very, very least, they are consistently guilty of focusing on trivial issues and not giving a platform to the things that really, really matter. We have all seen Boris Johnson hanging off a tripwire. We've all seen how Anne Widdecombe got swept across the floor at Strictly Come Dancing. We all know Theresa May can't do an ABBA dance. How many people know what Change UK's education policy is? How many people know what the Green Party would do about military spending? Like, do we know these things in detail? The newspapers don't cover this. Why don't they cover this? This stuff matters much more than piffle about dance routines. But there's, it's not being focused on. Secondly, democracy is meaningless unless we know what we're voting for. So with the Brexit referendum, there were a lot of people who wanted Brexit, and some of them wanted no deal Brexit, and some of them wanted quite a hard Brexit that would take us out of the customs union, and some of them thought we'd definitely stay in the customs union, but we'd have more of a sort of Norway style Brexit. And people seem to have like all these different ideas. A lot of them were just voting for more money for the health service on the basis of a bus. Nobody knew exactly what they were voting for, and if we don't know what we're voting for, then democracy is kind of meaningless. And when it comes to voting in the elections, we get this as well, where you vote for a party and they have all these policies, and do you agree with all of them? No, probably not. But you kind of have to pick which party overall. After the last election, I had signed a petition saying that I thought we should revoke Article 50 and renegotiate and start again with Brexit. And then I got an email from Theresa May responding to that petition saying, well, in the general election, 80% of people voted either Tory or Labour, both Brexit supporting parties. People must want Brexit. I was like, but just because you voted for that party doesn't mean you support every single thing in their manifesto. Maybe you thought that healthcare and education were more important than other issues. Maybe you voted for those parties because you didn't want another party that you really were very strongly against getting in. it's super complicated, and to assume people support stuff, it just isn't true. We need to know exactly what we're voting for. And the European elections that we've just had, I keep hearing people say, well, I support Remain, so I voted Lib Dem, Green, Change UK, voted for the very strongly Remain parties. But it wasn't a referendum on Brexit. It was a vote about who we send to the European Union. And if you think the best person to send to the European Union is somebody who isn't even going to show up because they think the whole thing's a nonsense, then you haven't actually thought through what it is that you're voting for. Because even voting Brexit doesn't provide Brexit. It gives Nigel Farage a job that he is well paid for, but is not even going to show up for. Congratulations. Is that what you wanted? Next up. Democracy is meaningless unless it's a fair voting system. And certainly in terms of general elections in the UK, first past the post, the way that we do things now, is a terrible, terrible voting system. So you can literally have 9 candidates and they each get 10% of the vote, and one of them gets 20% of the vote, and that one gets elected. So even if all 8 of the 10% candidates are, for example, left-wing parties, and the one 20% candidate is a right-wing party, that's it. Your area is now represented by somebody whose views are very, very different from 80% of the constituents. The best thing you can do in a first past the post system is to run as a candidate yourself on every policy that you hate. That's the best way, because you will then split the vote of all those people who support policies that you hate. You'll divide the vote because you'll take some votes away from all of them, and it means people you agree with are more likely to get elected. And that's a terrible system. We should have a system where if you don't like any of the candidates, you should run and stand, and you'll have great policies and you'll be elected. You know, it would have been much better to go, for example, for AV. We had the opportunity a few years ago to change from first past the post to AV, and I was very much in favour of it. People kept telling me, smart people, nice people kept telling me, oh, I'm not going to vote for AV because I think we're better to wait and go for proportional representation. Which is like if somebody says, do you want chicken or shit for dinner? And you're like, no, I'm holding out for pork, so I'll have the shit. Sorry if that joke is offensive to vegetarians. And in fairness, shit is an animal product, so it might be offensive to vegans as well. But nonetheless, don't vote shit is an important message here. There are lots of different systems, and proportional representation, I think it's a better system than first past the post. That's what the European elections are, non-proportional representation, but still a lot of people don't seem to really understand it. There was a lot of talk about voting tactically, which kind of the point of proportional representation is that you shouldn't have to vote tactically. You should be able to vote more or less for whoever you want. Under first past the post, you almost always have to vote tactically. So it should be better than that, and yet there was a lot of people talking about that. People looking at websites based on algorithms that they definitely didn't understand. A lot of parties promoting those websites. Yeah, look, you know, but only, of course, if it happened to say that you should vote for them. It's a mess. Then you've got the issue of policy bundling, where you vote because you care about one issue, but all these other issues get lumped onto it. Sometimes because there's a party with a manifesto and you have to pick what you care about the most and vote for that. But even more than that, like, so there's most people in Australia are against having the Queen as their monarch. Like, most people in Australia would like to not have a monarch, especially not an English one. Slash German, whatever you want to think she is, but the point is, not the British one. And they were offered the chance to vote to get rid of the Queen, and they did not vote for it. But the reason was not because they'd suddenly decided, oh, she's not such a bad old thing. They voted to keep the Queen because the option on the ballot paper of getting rid of the Queen was tied in with all these other policies that were terrible and that people didn't want. So you're in that, it's like, now, do you want chicken or shit? Footnote, there's a diamond in the shit. And you're like, I'll take the shit. Now, we thought you liked shit. No, I like diamonds, and I'm willing to wash my hands after I get one. That's what policy bundling does. And so the alternative would be to let people vote case by case on loads of individual issues. And that doesn't work, because people are like, yeah, I want more funding for education. I want more funding for healthcare. I want more funding for welfare. I want more funding for facilities for disabled people. I want this. Oh, no, I don't want to pay any more tax. And so you have to vote for a party. You have to let people add the numbers up first and present them in a oneer and say, well, this is the overall group of policies that I want. And, you know, if we could, thank you, could we just have a party that wants to solve all those issues and end austerity and also close all the tax havens and do all that kind of stuff? Like, you've got to present a bundle of policies that add up to a tangible strategy that fits together. You want to criminalise more things, you need to hire more police to deal with that. You want, like, it doesn't work to vote for individual policies without putting them all together. So here's the thing, democracy is fucked, and it's kind of always going to be fucked because there isn't a perfect kind of democracy. There isn't one system where everybody gets exactly what they want in a completely fair way. There's loads of different systems and they all favour somebody over something else, and they all favour groups against each other, and they all favour, you know, slightly different things. And we can't ever make it perfect, but we can make it better. We can make it loads better. And there's basically three things that I think we can do that make it loads better. And the first one is teach people about how democracy works and how government works and how they can play an active role in it. And I think it should be on the national curriculum. It's something that young people have a right to know. Let's teach people how to understand what's going on so that they're not reliant on some algorithm they don't understand or hearsay from newspapers about how they should vote or what's going on. Let's teach them how to analyse the facts. Let's teach them how to understand the numbers and make really good choices for themselves. Secondly, the newspapers, and this includes, like, you know, social media and the stuff that we're sharing and all like that. You know, Facebook should be for figuring out why vaccines are evil, nothing else. And we should be on the case of the newspapers. We need a really strong regulatory body to make sure that newspapers not only publish truth and don't twist things, but also are pushed to cover the important issues. And every party needs to be forced to issue a manifesto which covers at least the big issues like healthcare, welfare, education, defence, you know, the stuff without which we cannot know what they're going to do if they get into power. And then finally, annual elections. I mean, you know, the Chartists were right. They were right about everything else. This would hold politicians so much more accountable. And, you know, we had a vote on Brexit. It's been well over a year. The situation has definitely changed. We know more about it now. Things have started to evolve. We know what direction things are taking. Let's have another vote and see where we feel about it. I don't think that's anti-democratic. I think it's more democratic. The whole thing, more voting, more democracy. Nobody ever goes, oh, not another Love Island. I'm going to have to vote for yet another unreasonably gorgeous, overly tanned couple who I have no actual emotional connection to. To be honest with you, I don't actually watch Love Island, but still, I don't think it's a problem to ask people to vote. People love voting. People will pay money to vote. They do it on reality TV all the time. Once a year, general election. It's an idea that's been around since the very nubbins of democracy, and it was a good idea then, and it's a good idea now.